All right. Well, hey, good morning, guys. Michael and Israel here with another Technician Tuesday. How did you like the fancy little countdown timer? Trying some different things this morning. How you doing today?
Good. Busy.
Yes.
Busy.
So we'll jump right into it, guys. If you've got questions, get them dropped in the comment section. Anything that's on your mind, any questions you've got. A lot of stuff going on. I know a lot of folks getting out, a lot of tournaments. A lot of guys getting boats ready for winterization. Maybe we can rehash some of that just to make sure that somebody hears it that needs it.
The time is near.
Yes. So I will say, speaking of busyness, so I did not have a bunch of time to go through and find a bunch of questions out there on the internet, because I had to get all the Hobie stuff in and ordered. The water, paddle sports is just like everything else we're seeing. They are trying to crank stuff out as quick as they can, but I think yesterday I opened up sales on the Hobies. And some of the bigger dealerships got first dibs, and they were already sold out through like December. So we got stuff in and ordered. Exciting. Some new cool kayak stuff. We got boats coming in. I saw some pontoons getting dropped off this morning.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting some Avids in. You can see. Let's see where.
Right there.
Some center consoles.
We got some bass, small.
All right.
Fish,
and then
boats too.
I will definitely make sure to plug Virtual Fish Fest, October 24th, 25th, and then the following week, Lots of opportunities to get some discounts, win some prizes. I'm working on getting more info out on exactly what we're doing with all that. But mark your calendars. That's going to be fun. I'm excited to see how all that goes down. So it looks like we got one quick question. What do I have to do to winterize my outboard?
Well, it depends on the outboard, but for the most part, you got to check and make sure the the gearbox doesn't have any water in it. A lot of times people will get a fishing line around the prop shaft seals, and um, it'll open it up to the elements, and it can get water in there. If it gets enough water in there and it freezes outside, it's going to freeze the inside of that gear case and break it. So the other thing is if you get as much fuel out of it as possible, I mean, down to about 1/8 of the tank, that would be best as well. And go ahead and put stabilizer in it when you're running it out. That way it gets the stabilizer into the fuel system of the engine. Other than that, we like to at least either fog it if you're not able to fog it easily. You can pull the plugs out and put some oil in the cylinders,
okay,
and turn the motor over without cranking it, and it'll coat the cylinders with a little bit of oil, keep it from rusting. So that's the main outboard procedure.
Yeah, that fuel, if you haven't heard that conversation, I think we've talked about that a lot over the last couple months for sure. Ethanol versus non-ethanol. Now probably a good time to go find those non-ethanol spots so that you don't end up with that sitting in your tank and then
it used to be recommended to fill it all the way up because it would degrade slower, but it degrades pretty quick these days, especially when there's a lot of humidity in the air. So we're finding it's better just to get it out of the tank, and then that way when you start off the next year, we're putting real fresh gas in there and a lot less running issues, and engine failures.
All right. Let me jump down here. What do you think about a 90 versus a 115 on a Bentley 20-foot pontoon? And why do competitors say the 115 isn't able to be on their 20-foot pontoons? From a tech standpoint, thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not real sure about the competitor part.
Yeah.
If you're talking about competitor Bentley versus Crest or Bennington, or if it's Yamaha versus Mercury, I don't know.
Most of your 20-footer pontoons that I'm aware of, usually you can get into the 115 on a 20-foot.
Well, I can tell you this, that I don't know if I can consider this last year or year before last. Year before last, we bought a lot of pontoons, and we don't rig them, the smaller pontoons with the motors, until it's been bought and somebody chooses kind of what motors they want. But the year before that, we sold a bunch of 90s. I mean, we didn't sell a bunch of 115. So the next year, we stocked up on 90s, and this last year, everybody wanted 115. So it's kind of hard to judge the market. So what a lot of people do is they buy, not everybody does what we do, where we give you the option before we rig it. They just rig them and put them out there so they're ready to go. And it makes the buying process and getting your boat a lot quicker, but you don't always get what you want. Or you decide to get a 115 and it costs a lot more because you have to unrig and then rig, and then it takes more time. So what we've done is we put a lot of the pre-rig into the boat itself and not necessarily the engine. And this last year we bought more 115s because most everybody was wanting to max out the rigging versus the 90 versus the 115. Do you see much difference in the speed and the power? I don't know, because we didn't put very many 90s on. So, I don't know.
Did we do any of the Bentleys this year with a? I'm trying. I mean, I think most of the Bentleys went out with 115s.
Yeah, 115.
We didn't.
150s.
Bentley was a new brand for us this year. I know across the board, it seems like like Bentley versus Crest. I think the Bentleys are a little bit lighter in the way they're designed. They tend to get a little bit more speed, obviously relative to pontoon performance. Most guys aren't getting pontoons for high performance stuff.
And then on the other hand, if we're talking competitor boat wise, some some companies like maybe even Tracker, I don't know for sure because I haven't looked at their product, but they may only rate them for a 90 for a price point, so
Right.
they don't have to compete with themselves because they might have a 20-foot deluxe boat versus this 20-foot just normal boat, and they're only going to put a 90 on this one and put the 115s on the ones they want reserved as their more premium 20-foot boat.
So
something to think about.
From a technician standpoint, do you see any advantages, disadvantages? 9115, does it cost anything more for regular service?
Well, no, the service is going to be the same because they're the same platform. So one of them has just got a different fuel map, and they put a choke over the intake.
Okay.
The throttle valve, they'll put a little air choke on it and change the software in the computer for it to be able to run with that choke.
Okay.
So if you took the choke off, it would just blow the motor up because the fuel map is not rated for that. So, but as far as maintenance goes, it's the same. They got the same fuel filters, the same water pumps, the same oil capacity and everything. It's when you jump up to the 150 is when everything changes.
Okay. Yeah. And of course, you jump up to 150. Typically, you're going to see adding hydraulic steering, which increases your expense. It's another system that could potentially give you problems down the road. I know I'll say, and what I talk to most customers about, not to turn this into a big sales discussion, the 115 on a 20-foot pontoon, and if you think about it just from a resale standpoint, there's a huge market for guys across the board that are going to be looking for that 20-foot with a 115. Yeah. As you get smaller and smaller motors on, you may save money on the initial purchase, but you also make it harder. If you bought that 20-foot boat with a 60 because you only care about going, 12 miles an hour and you just want to get out and, have a good time on the water, the next guy like me who's got a couple of kids wants to be able to pull the tubes, all that kind of stuff, that 115. So that's just from a sales perspective and maybe just an ownership of that different boat. And I've never heard anybody say, I wish I'd gotten less horsepower on my boat. But I know from personal experience, there's plenty of times that I would say.
I had one guy say that.
You did?
Yeah. It was on a John boat.
Okay.
He put a big motor. He didn't like it.
So typically,
he's an older guy.
Yeah. But that's some stuff I'd throw out to you if you were standing here looking and considering. But yeah, like Iz said, the way we do pontoons, the volume that we sell, we order boats, motors, and trailers all separate. We get a lot of folks in the region that choose not to get a trailer, so we're not going to try and burden you. A lot of folks just can't store it, and we come and pick the boat up a couple times a year, knock out the service. That's a pretty easy one. So hopefully that helps you with a 90 versus 115. I think both. I spent a lot of years pulling some tubes with a 90 horsepower on a 24-foot. Now it's a tri-tune, so it got a little bit better performance. And I certainly wish my grandfather had spent a little more money on a little bit more motor, but I still got out and had some fun. So hope that helps. Y'all heard of Yamaha motor making oil?
Yeah, they can. I mean, especially during break-in, it may make a little bit. But if you stick to the break-in procedure, it should be less likely. And most of them that have been some of the bigger motors where people have got big graphs and like to do a lot of idling around with their graphs. And we discourage that at least for the first 5 hours of breaking the engine in. Because you're not getting those engine and that oil temperature up high enough. And if you're just idling around, the engines tend to run a little rich at idle anyway, especially in cooler weather. And then during takeoff, it really, if you're doing some graphing over here, and then you want to go across the river about 100 yards and do more graphing over there. Every time you do that, on takeoff, coming out of the hole, it showers it with fuel. So those are usually typical motors that are going to get a little bit of extra, rise in the oil, because you're putting extra fuel in there, and that fuel is not getting burned off. Ends up going in the crankcase. So when and Shane's about to get his Avid, so this is going to be important for him. That first 2 hours of break-in are really critical. That you put a lot of load, and you got a lot of stuff in your boat, so you should have plenty of load. But we're going to keep that jack plate way down. We're going to keep that engine tucked under the first hour, and change RPMs pretty regularly, and you shouldn't see a problem with it if we do that.
Yeah, and Shane, when you pick the boat up, or one of the other techs is going to go through all the systems with you, answer any of those questions, and of course, we're a text or a phone call away. Once you get out there, I've seen, especially on the pontoon side or new boater side, you get that fire hose information, you come pick the boat up, and then 2 days later, when you're finally able to get on the water, wait a second, what did you say? How many hours? Yeah. And you call back up here.
And the good news is I've got it all written out on the sheet now, typed up, so you just keep it in your pocket and for a quick reference, take a picture of it with your phone.
Yeah, I think Yamaha's actually, the owner's manual's got a pretty good little.
They do. But I've got a more detailed.
Gotcha.
More detailed
break down the advanced algorithm of braking procedures.
What it is when we have say we had a power head failure, and for whatever reason, a RTA, one of our regional technicians from Yamaha come, they don't open that book, but they'll go through a really detailed break-in, and we end up going out together and doing it. And from the 4 or 5 that's come up here in the last 16 years, they've all been relatively the same, and they've seemed to make a big difference doing it that way. So I just adopted it for the customers, because if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us.
Yeah, no kidding. All right. Any certain type oil to put into the cylinders?
I would just get some 2-stroke oil. I'd rather use it because it's a little bit thinner than 4-stroke oil, and it seems to kind of splatter around and then and not settle at the bottom like the 4-stroke oil does. So I'd use just it doesn't have to be a real high-end oil, just something to coat the cylinders. I wouldn't get like the Pennzoil or anything like that. I'd get maybe some Premium Plus, and you just buy a pint or a quart of it and keep it in your garage because it lasts a long time.
Gotcha.
And then you can get you a little turkey baster or something. You can use that because they're usually kind of long. And you got most of the cylinders got coilover plugs, so you got to get in there a little further than normal. So you don't want to just squirt it in there and raise it up. You want to try to get it in the cylinder if you're going to do it that way. Otherwise, you can spray it right into the intake while it's running until when it starts smoking. You got to cut it off.
Just don't take your wife's turkey baster.
No, you might want to either maybe get her old one, buy her a nice new one.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Points.
That's not a bad idea. Here we are giving out relationship advice on Tech Tuesday. Love it.
We're here for you.
All right. Just want to thank you for the work done on my motor last week. Ran like new until idled across a rock and messed up blade on prop. Well, that's I think I saw another story. John Cox took the skeg, the bottom portion of his skeg off.
Well, we appreciate it, Johnny. I enjoyed working on it. I'm sorry you hit your prop, but we talked about it. He kind of needed to upgrade props anyway, so it's a good opportunity.
All right,
a little sooner than
silver lining.
That's it.
All right. Thanks for your information. So how about a standard Yamaha 90 versus the 90 show? That was in relation to the pontoon.
I would say that they're both great engines. The main difference is the SHO is going to have variable valve timing, so depending on what you're putting it on, if you're putting it on the pontoon, if you're pulling somebody, it'll make a difference because the low end torque is really great because it's actually moving that intake valve. It's advancing it a good bit up to about 4,000 RPMs, and then it just settles back down from there. So if you're planning on, I would say on a bass boat or a John boat that you're going to be fishing out of, if you've got a lot of tackle, a little bit of weight in the boat, the SHO is going to make a difference.
Sorry, guys. Got a little tickle in my throat. So I'll throw in with that all of our Bentleys are sold with Mercuries. So that's just, I don't know. There's some business reasons why.
Well,
I mean, it's a lot of the volume.
The volume we do on them, we end up being able to price it a little bit lower than the Yamaha. Yeah. We get a little bit better prices on those Mercuries when we buy them in bulk.
All right. This may have to be my last one. Whew. Sorry, guys. Have you seen better performance between the show and new Merc on a Falcon? I'm going to step out here real quick.
All right, that's fine.
Go for
it. I've had a few boats out there with Yamahas on them, but they were bigger Falcons, but I didn't run the same one with a Mercury on it. So I think more than likely they're going to perform close to the same range. I know the show typically seems to come out of the hole a little better overall, but I haven't been on any of the Falcons. The 195 Falcons. I don't think I've driven any of those with a Yamaha on them. The 205 I have, but I hadn't driven the 205 with a Mercury on it. So I can't give you a good answer on that. They seem to do the 205 seem to perform really good with the Yamaha. So.
Be a good question for Dano because I know he's run both. So maybe we can get him on and put out some info on that. All right. I think a lot of that comes down to a lot of guys with just comfort of Yamaha versus Mercury.
Yeah.
So the show have the same unvented prop.
The show runs an unvented prop, preferably, and that has a lot to do with the load on the engine. So if you run a vented prop with a show, sometimes they can blow out a little bit, and the engine isn't able to sense as much load. And so if it doesn't sense as much load, it's not going to advance the timing during your whole shot as well as on top end.
Okay.
So I've had guys that say their vented prop runs great, and as long as it's not blowing out and it keeps the same amount of load, the engine's going to run the same. But there is going to be some instances in some boats that it may cavitate a little bit more easily, and you're going to lose performance overall on top end and whole shot if you have vents in it. So if you're running a Mercury, if you end up running a Mercury prop like a Fury or something, you would want to put the solid blowout covers in it. So.
All right. So asking 205 TE or the Predator. Okay. Best advice I could give you for that discussion of Yamaha versus Mercury on the Falcon is call up here. We'll get you in touch with Dano. I think his 2019 205 that he ran had a Yamaha on it, if I remember correctly. And then this year he's been running it with a Mercury. And I know he's more than willing, loves talking Falcon, and can talk to you about the pluses and minuses, performance difference.
Yeah, the guy that's got his old one says it performs pretty good.
I mean, I'd say, the biggest conversation that a lot of folks are having is just the show that's been around forever versus the Mercury.
And I think they've changed a few little things up between those year models now too.
Yeah.
So they put some kind of little things on the back that help it with the whole shadow blade.
All right. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions, and I'm dying over here. So I think I'm going to go get some lunch and get back to work. And I know you got a ton of stuff to get done today, as always. So, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If we didn't get to your question, or if you got some other stuff, drop it in the comments, and we'll at least get it next week. But I'm going to go try not to choke on myself, and then all right. Thank you, guys. We'll shout out you next week, and well, give us a call if there's anything we can do.
That's right.
Talk to you later. Thanks, guys.